Hello everyone, John's hand loading here. I'm working on my next steps on my Remington Model 29 shotgun. I got everything taken apart as far as I can. The internals and stuff are over here. Everything's here. My next steps are going to be getting the stock prepped for refinishing and getting the receiver cleaned up. So I'm going to go through how I'm going to clean up the receiver, and I decided that because it's got so many pits in it and rust, I'm actually going to clean it up real good, degrease it with some brake cleaner, and then blow it off with air to get all the chunks and nastiness out of the inside of it. And then I'm going to soak it either for a day, maybe two, I don't know, we'll see how long, in regular household vinegar. So that's the next step for the prep of the receiver. Then the stock here, if you look, you can see this. This is actually where someone had this stock shortened for length of pull. Probably done by a gunsmith, because it's a really good cut. A really good cut. You can't see it good with my lighting probably, but the original hole for the stock bolt is right here, and there is a stock bolt in there, but also there's these two other holes, which this one's not perfectly centered. The point is, at some point this was adjusted for length of pull. This stock was cut and shortened, and the two pieces were mated back together, and somebody did a really good job of mating this wood together. I've actually already just started to back it out, otherwise it would be just slightly tighter. And if you could see inside here, this hole is no longer perfectly aligned to where the bolt comes into the back here, and it's because the length of pull was shortened on this piece of wood. So there's a couple things I'm going to do here. I'm probably going to show you guys what it looks like when you only use lemon oil on a stock. I'm going to take this apart, take these screws out, show you what the stock bolt looks like. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to take these two screws out just so I can get easier access to the inside here. The trigger group taken out, and this was the stock bolt. It's a little bit buggered up on the end. Had to take this piece of extension off with the two screws to get in there and get inside the actual original stock hole. So next thing I'm going to do, because this is a little bit beat up and starting to come apart in here, the wood's really delicate, there's a crack there, it's a little soft. So I'm going to actually show you guys how I clean and prep this if I'm not going to refinish it. So the first thing I'm going to do on video is I'm going to get some lemon oil and a rag, and I'm going to rub this down and show you what it looks like as it gets cleaned off. And believe it or not, the lemon oil alone will clean it up real good and make it look a lot nicer. This is as original right now, as the way I received it. It's kind of dirty, it's got grease and nastiness on it. And I'm going to do that on camera. I'm not going to do any other cleaning, no mineral spirits, no other prep of the wood at first. This first wood processing video right now, I'm going to just use lemon oil so we can see what it looks like. Okay, I'm back and I'm ready to use my lemon oil on my wood stock. So the first thing I want you to notice is I'm using nitrile gloves and wearing eye protection. I know people will think that I'm being the safety fairy, but you really don't want to get this stuff all over you. Another thing about this, and basically everything we're going to use except for the vinegar, everything that we use to prep the wood stock, everything that we use to prep the metal, except for the vinegar, is going to be flammable, combustible. You need to be careful with that stuff. You don't want to set your house on fire, set your shop on fire, none of that stuff. When I use rags with this stuff or mineral spirits or anything else, I use them and then throw them away outside because they can spontaneously combust. Especially later on in the process, we'll probably be using boiled linseed oil. That stuff generates heat. That stuff's very flammable. What I'm doing here right now is I'm just using plain old, this is Formby's, but any lemon oil will work, really. Soaking this old piece of sock really good with it because you want a lot of it. You want to really soak it in there. And we're going to just take this stock as it sits, dirty, greasy, nasty, and I'm just going to rub it on there. And successive cleanings, I mean, this stuff actually does clean. It doesn't just quote-unquote shine it up. It will really clean off of there. Like if I had a different colored rag, you can see all the gunk and junk that comes off. You know, I'm sure you can see it getting shiny on camera, but it's also removing the grease and dirt and filth that's on there. One of the things about the lemon oil is if I get a good coating down inside this checkering, it'll take a lot of the gunk and junk out of there too and make that look much nicer than it does now. And I don't know if you can tell on camera or not, but this grip area, that grip area actually, just from that tiny little bit of rubbing, went from being like black and nasty looking to being really pretty wood grain showing through already. And it was just 4 or 5 seconds of lemon oil on there. Oh yeah, and I can actually see there's a buildup of gunk on my rag already. Really good stuff. Years ago I used to clean a lot of old military rifles, and there was always a discussion of how far should you go, and you know, some people will totally sporterize an old rifle or do whatever they want to it, and it's their rifle, they can do whatever they want. Some of them were in really good condition underneath all of the years of gunk and buildup and cosmoline and dirt. And 2 or 3 turns with this stuff, you know, taking the stock, just cleaning it down real good, rubbing it down, then wiping it off, letting it sit for a couple hours, and then coming back and wiping it down all over again. Man, some of those gun stocks and some of those old rifles, old military rifles, they would be beautiful. And they didn't need to be refinished. They didn't need to be sanded. They didn't need to be, you know, prepped and pretty much all the quote-unquote patina taken off of them. All they needed was a good cleaning with lemon oil. And I've seen it, you know, and this stock right now, I hope the camera captures it. Usually the camera actually does a better job than I think it is when I look through the viewfinder on the camera. But man, in my eyeball, oh, and right here you can see the difference a little bit. If you look at this part that hasn't been rubbed yet, it's still kind of black and nasty looking, and right here it's dark and nasty looking, but right there it starts to turn pretty and wood grain and shine coming through. Yeah, that's really actually coming out much nicer than you would think if you didn't actually go through the process. And this is why I'm doing it on camera, because I don't know what I'm gonna find, and honestly, if I can save somebody from sanding and refinishing a rifle that just needs a good cleaning, I want to do that. I had an old shotgun once, made in the 50s, and it looked rough. It looked real rough. But doing this process and just wiping it off, it took years of grime off of it and made it look beautiful. Wow, I have just started on this end and it looks great already. I don't want to make this a 4-hour video, but let me get a little more sauce on here and give that a quick wipe on camera, and then I'll end the video. Just to show you guys, it doesn't necessarily always need to be sanded and refinished. And then I'll do the other side of the stock off camera. And I know some people will say, well, once it dries, it's not going to look like that anymore. That's not entirely so. This really soaks in really well. And you can wipe it off, and I may, just to prove my point, you can wipe it off, and it still looks clean and shiny afterwards. Wow, that really, really looks light years better than it did 5 minutes ago. And I've only done one pass here on camera. Take a look at that. Now, who would have thought, and yeah, I know it's still got marks and stuff on it, you know, thing's 90 years old and beat up, really beat up. But just from lemon oil, look how shiny and clean that looks. And for those who think you wipe it off, it won't look like that. Wrong. Okay. And that's what it looks like. Am I going to end up sanding it and putting boiled linseed oil on it? Yeah, probably. Because it's got all these dings and chunks missing. But if you had a wood stock and it was your grandfather's old shotgun, or, you know, an M1 Garand, or something that was worth something to you and you really didn't want to refinish it, you don't have to. You can rub it down with lemon oil, and I'm telling you the truth, 2 or 3 successive sessions of rubbing the entire stock down, and you can do it with the metal on it too, and it won't hurt the bluing or the metal usually. It'll get cleaner every successive session of rubbing it down with lemon oil and a cloth. It takes more layers of gunk off. Now, this looks so much better than it did at the beginning. So just wanted to share the lemon oil stock cleaning and preserving with you. So that's what we're doing here. I'm going to finish the other side of the stock off camera and then wipe it down with a clean rag just to get some of the oiliness off of it and show you what it looks like when it's done. So let's get back to this wood stock. If you look, it looks pretty clean. It looks a lot cleaner and shinier than it did when we first picked it up and started looking at it. And that's just from wiping it with lemon oil one time. And it looks a lot better than it did. But I want to show how to sand and refinish this thing, so that's what we're going to do. Now, for starters, just to see how it works, I'm actually just taking a little piece of 600 wet dry sandpaper, 600 grit, which is not aggressive. It's not going to cut a lot, but I want to see how it does on this finish, because it's kind of really bald right here, but there's finish on both sides, and I just want to see what it does. So I'm going to sand with this for a second, see what happens, and then take it from there. If I need to, I'll get a more aggressive grit. I'm not worried about pushing with my fingers, because I'm kind of going to just hold it on the stock and go with the contour of the stock with the wood grain. I'm not pushing too hard. I'm really just going to try to smooth what's here, kind of open the pores of the wood up, scrape it off a little bit. It's almost like a good scrubbing or a good cleaning, really, is what I'm doing right now. You don't want to push too hard or be too aggressive, because then you will end up with big grooves in it from your fingers or your thumb or whatever. But if you just kind of go with the grain, you can see I'm starting to already get some stuff off on it. So this is what the stock looks like at the moment. It is in pretty good shape. I'm probably not going to sand anymore on it. I'm relatively happy with it. So what I did was I went and got 150 grit sandpaper that I had in the house and sanded the stock down with that. And then once I was pretty happy with where I got with the 150 grit, I went back to the 600 because I didn't have any 220 or 320, anything in between the two. Normally, if this was like a really meaningful piece of wood or a project that I was trying to keep and make into as nice a piece as I possibly can, I would use progressively finer grains of sandpaper. But I've only got that for now, and I really don't want to invest a lot of money into this project. But the idea is strip off the old stuff, smooth the wood, open the pores up a little bit. Now what you'll see here, there's a crack, you can't really see it on camera probably, right here that I'm going to fill in and glue later. But right now, what you'll see here is all the sawdust that got trapped in here in the grip, and there's a little bit in the crack back here too. We're going to get that out with a toothbrush, like this, by brushing it out. Okay, we're going to go through our checkering with a toothbrush. It's a nice windy day out here today. You can probably hear it on the microphone. But we're going to clean that out real good, go through, get the cracks out. If there's any places that I need to, I'll use this kind of a brush to sort of dust in it and clean it up. That's what you want to do. I'm also going to take some denatured alcohol in a rag and wipe all this down, which I'll do on camera. But before I do that, I want to get as much of the sawdust that's embedded out with a brush as I can. You know, that checkering, you just don't want the stuff jammed in there, because then it'll get stuck in whatever boiled linseed oil or whatever finish we put on it. You don't want that in there. Okay? So I'm going to continue this, and then wipe it down with denatured alcohol to get rid of more of the sawdust and kind of clean it up. Then I'm going to let it dry. And I'm going to show you that right now on camera. Denatured alcohol on a rag. When you do this with either mineral spirits or denatured alcohol, what you'll see when it's wet is approximately what the wood will look like when it gets refinished. Okay, that's pretty much what it's going to look like after it gets refinished. Now all I'm doing right now is trying to clean the sawdust off. This stuff dries quick. Sometimes it gets a little sticky on the old finish, depending on what kind of finish was on it. But when it's wet like that, it gives you a nice idea of the potential for what the stock will look like. And a good thing to do too, like here you have this staining in here. If this was a rifle or shotgun that was very important to you and you were trying to make it into a showpiece, you may sand some more or put stripper on it or something to try and get some of the staining out if you didn't like the staining, because this will again tell you pretty much once it's refinished, this is what the wood's going to look like. Okay, and then it's going to evaporate and dry off, and it's not going to look like that anymore. But it's a good way to test what your grain is going to look like and how it's going to come alive when you refinish it. So this is what our stock looks like now. It's been sanded with 150 grit sandpaper, then 600 grit sandpaper, and cleaned off with denatured alcohol. I believe I'm going to leave it pretty much like it is right now and use boiled linseed oil on the stock when I get into the refinishing. There's a few spots that still have a little bit of finish on them, and that's okay. The linseed oil thinned with mineral spirits will kind of soak in around it, and they may look darker. These spots that have some little bits of finish may look a little darker, but that's okay. A lot of times it blends in real nice. If there's a little bit of finish left there, that's okay. We'll see how it comes out. I'm going to do all that on camera. I'm going to try to just film it as I go and cut out the boring parts. And we'll see how it goes. So please stay tuned for more update videos. And watch for the videos on the rebluing process as well. As always, thanks for watching.